Hello, friends. Welcome to our What is a TCK session. My name is Chad Phillips, and we're excited to be a part of this. Over here we have.
I'm Rachel Clanton.
Awesome.
Excited.
So we are excited for this opportunity to share with you. I know we have people joining us in Europe. We have some teenagers that are part of international churches that'll be joining us. We have other families around the world. This is being recorded, and we will be posting it later as well. So some of you will be watching this tape delayed. Tape, that's a
Tape delayed?
Yeah, that's a very old school saying.
I was going to say.
Because there's no such thing as tape anymore. So some of you see the flags in the PowerPoint, which we'll post right now. And if you're looking at the flags, maybe you see your flag in there, or a country that you've lived in, or a place where you currently live right now. But that is, it's always fun to see that. Rachel, do you see any of your countries in there?
I see some of the countries in South America, but I'm not seeing my country specific.
Wow.
We're going to have to add that in there.
Well, we're going to talk about what is a TCK and the TCK identity today. And just so you know, this is just like scratching the surface for what is a TCK. We're going to start with the basic fundamentals today, go through the TCK identity, but then over the course of the next few months, we'll be doing more sessions on the TCK identity and who God created us to be in the lives that we live on a global nomad setting. So as we get started, we have a few faces to show you, and we want to know, what do these people have in common? And we're going to scroll through them. You see those two right there. Go on. There we go. Two more. Yep. Okay, so the last one. All of those people are TCKs. So we'll look at a few of them just so you can see who they are and where they're from. Angela Kinsley. She was 2 when her family moved from Louisiana to Indonesia, where her father worked as a drilling engineer. She lived there 12 years, attended international school until the age of 14. She's from a TV show called The Office. Have you ever watched The Office?
I haven't, but I hear that's really popular in the US.
That's, yeah. It's,
so
which
I've
is,
seen clips.
I know,
But,
I know, which I know a lot of people that have watched it, but
yeah.
I haven't watched it.
I'm sure she's an amazing person.
Yes.
So.
Who's the next one here? Oh, Viggo Mortensen. Now, Viggo, you want to talk about him?
Well, I mean, we've already discussed him a little bit, because I don't know if you guys have watched this little series called the Lord of the Rings series, but it's pretty popular in some parts of the world. People haven't seen it, but Viggo is actually a TCK, and he, like you see it, he was born in New York City, and mother is American, father is Danish, which you have some connection with. But they met in Norway, and they lived in Venezuela, Denmark, and he actually settled in Argentina, which is my part of the world.
Okay.
Yay!
So that's why you like Viggo. Awesome. Who's next? Who do we have next on there? Oh, Mark Hamill. Now, do you know who this is?
Of course I know who this is.
Well, I was worried.
But I didn't know that he was a TCK.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't either until we did this. Father was a career naval officer. Most notably, it says in Yokohama High School, Japan. Star Wars.
Of course.
Who
doesn't know Star Wars?
The Jedi in Star Wars. Okay, who do we have next?
Zoe Deschanel. Wow, I didn't realize that she was a TCK.
Yeah, and I've seen her name. I've heard her name.
You've never seen New Girl?
No.
Oh my goodness. Okay. No. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about her?
Well, I see she calls Los Angeles home. Was raised in places like the Seychelles, Yugoslavia, and London. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much all I know about her.
Oh.
But I think she has a sister that plays on the TV show Bones.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
And so I do watch that one. So I assume her sister is also a TCK.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
So who's our next one?
Uma Thurman. Wow.
There we go. Yeah. Born in Boston, but until 9 years old, grew up in the Himalayan town of Almora. Uttarakhand in India.
Nicely done.
Just an interesting thing to make note of. We're showing some American TCKs. So these are people that have been born in America but raised other places. But TCK doesn't just revolve around people born in America living in other places.
Correct.
These are just examples because they're famous people that we're wanting you to see the concept. Do we have one more? That's it. So am I or are my kids
TCKs?
TCKs? That's a valid question.
Exactly.
So how do we know? Here's some fun questions. Why don't you go through a couple of them?
So you know that you're a TCK when your accent changes, depending on who you're talking to. I don't know if you've ever done that. Like you're ordering something or you walk into an airport and realize that your accent is changing. You often slip foreign slang into your English or any other language by mistake, and then people look at you kind of like strangely because they didn't understand.
Unless they're other TCKs.
Exactly. Then they kind of pick up on things.
Yeah, then they get it. Because
But
every
yeah.
once in a while you throw French out there.
Yeah.
Because you know I speak French, I'm
Yep.
assuming. And I throw Spanish out there for you.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
Okay.
And it works in an environment where you're around people that are TCKs. It not so much when you're around people that are just like, what? You're just weird. So
Right. Well, people do that too. So your passport looks like it's been through a hard time. I know many TCKs, they thrive on how many stamps they can get in their passports.
yes.
And-
Or how many passports you've had in your lifetime.
Yes. I had an interesting experience recently. I actually have 2 passports from the United States now.
Okay.
So because
Some of your travels, huh?
some of my travels, I go to unique places. I don't like stamps and passport from some places. But I went into my small town in America to apply for my second passport so I could have 2 concurrent passports. And in small town USA, the
That's a
lady's
shocker,
like,
I bet.
you can't have more than 1 passport. And I'm like, never mind. And I went somewhere else to get my passport. So
Yeah.
we like having those stamps in our passports. The next one,
I know. I do hate this question. Where are you from?
where are you from?
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one.
Very hard.
It is a hard, and we'll go into that in just a second, how you answer it. Yeah, and you run into your elementary school or middle school, high school friends in unlikely countries at unlikely times.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in college,
Mhm.
I went to college in the United States. I went to high school in the Netherlands, and I have my Netherlands mug today. And I was at a sporting event in Minneapolis where the opposing team was there playing volleyball, and one of the guys on the opposing team came up to me, and he was a friend of mine from high school.
Oh, no way.
I was just I had no idea that he was even in Minnesota,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
any of it, and it was just an odd experience.
Yeah.
So-
I don't know if you've had this happen, but you'll be in a place and you'll take a picture for Instagram and somebody will DM you and be like, hey, you're in my city. Like,
Yeah.
come hang out. So
Yeah,
people that you may have crossed paths with before. So
which is
that's pretty
hard
cool.
because you don't often have time to stop in and see
Yes.
people.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
It's true.
okay, what do we have next? Okay, you know your TCK when you definitely know your way around jet lag recovery. Do you have a process for recovering from jet lag?
I generally, if I am going to cross time zones, I know that if I'm going to cross like 3 time zones, it'll probably take me 3 days to recover. I also know that I don't go to bed until 9 o'clock in whatever country that I'm in, and then hopefully try and reset my sleep cycle.
You
So,
almost have to force yourself to sleep.
Yeah.
Try to.
yeah, it's
to
true.
do that. Yeah, your circle of
cool.
best friends is very diverse across all spectrums, politically, racially, religiously. You have diverse friends. You've had rigorous sensitivity training,
Yes.
real
True.
life, because you're
True.
around people of all sorts of backgrounds. And of course, the last one, you get nervous whenever a form needs you to enter a permanent address.
It's true.
What does that mean, a permanent address?
I have no clue, but I get nervous every time.
Yeah, so there's that awkward question. Where are you from? So how do you answer that?
So I mean, are we going to explain what a TCK is?
We will.
Okay, all right.
We will.
Because where am I from? See, I'm already struggling. But I I tend to gauge people's reactions. So I will look at them and say, you want to know in the US or do you want to know where I'm from? Because if they want to know the US, then I'll tell them where my parents are from or the
Right.
last place I lived for any period of time. But if they really want to know, then I figure they'll ask that question. And then I'll say, okay, well, I grew up in South America, but I spent time in Africa and Europe and Asia and then moved to the US. So I've actually lived more places outside of the US than
Right.
in. So,
Right.
but I do hate that question. How
So
about you?
I think if we go to the next slide, you'll see some of my family background right there. So that is, those are pictures of my family. Top right corner, my grandma and grandpa. The middle picture with that baboon is my grandpa, and that was in Nigeria. They moved to Nigeria. They left the United States in 1939 and got there in January of 1940. So
there's like some war going on then.
There was World War II. Yeah,
That's
there
crazy.
was. So, and then the bottom left corner is my dad.
Okay.
He was actually
Aw.
flown home later on, like 2 years later, because
of the war.
yeah, they were worried that Nigeria was going to be invaded. So
Oh.
they flew him home by himself. And that's a clipping from the newspaper article when he got to his grandparents' hometown of Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh my goodness.
Don't you love that pith helmet he's wearing right
It's
there?
adorable. That's
So
crazy.
my dad was raised in Nigeria.
Okay.
As an American. And then I was raised in Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa,
Wow.
and the Netherlands.
Wow.
When you talk about people switching into other languages and accents, when I moved back to the States for first grade, South Africa is a different grade system. So school starts in January and ends in December. So it's not like our summer to summer.
Gotcha.
It's their summer to summer. But I came back to the States and I had a very strong Afrikaans accent.
Really?
Yes. So I sounded.
Can you slip into that for us?
I can't now.
Ah.
No. But people made fun of me.
Oh, because of the
Like
accent.
they really made fun of me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So as quick as I could, I lost that accent and tried to get an American accent because they made fun of me so much. So we can go on to the next slide. But I did spend most of my growing up years in the Netherlands. So I went to a couple different schools in Holland, and I do speak Dutch because I learned Afrikaans first in South Africa. When I moved to Holland, I learned Dutch pretty quickly. Yeah. But you'll see here, this map, I took a picture of this map. It was on the side of a school wall in Tanzania. And I was very offended by this map.
Yeah.
Because where's Holland?
I don't see it.
Yeah, it's not on there. So anyway, I just thought we'd throw that in there.
Wow.
So where am I from? Africa,
Europe,
Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, or am I from the Netherlands?
Yeah.
I do speak Dutch. I look Dutch. When I'm in Holland, I love Dutch. But where am I from? So we kind of have that. And I do the same thing when people ask me where I'm from. Like every time now, what I say that I'm in the States, I say I live in Missouri, and I define it that way. And if people want to know more, then they'll follow up. More.
Yeah.
So we ask here, what color are you? Are you blue or are you yellow? And in this picture illustration, blue would represent whatever your passport color is.
So like your parents.
Your parents' culture.
Which can be confusing too if you've got parents from two different nationalities.
Like Vigo.
Yeah.
Didn't he have parents from
Dutch
two different?
and American, I think.
Yeah,
yeah,
two different
Danish, American.
Danish.
Sorry.
Yeah, Danish. Yeah. So blue and yellow. So yellow would represent whatever cultures you're from.
Okay.
So for me, that's Holland and Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa is my yellow. And blue is my American passport. So then the question is, are you blue or are you yellow? If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there is a mixture. If you mix blue and yellow together, it's green.
Yeah.
But some TCKs, they process differently than just being totally blue and yellow, not totally like immersed one way or another. They're kind of on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see on the slide that there's a mixture somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not completely blue, you're not completely yellow,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe you're somewhere on the spectrum, which you'll see on the next slide. Yeah, there's the
Yeah.
hybrid. So if you're a TCK and you're watching this, and blue represents your passport culture, whatever your passport culture is, if it's German and you've spent your growing up years in Indonesia,
Mm-hmm.
where would you put yourself on this? Let's say you're a parent watching this right now and you're looking at this. Where do you think your kids put themselves on this?
Great question. That's a great question because, depending on where your kids put themselves or you yourself being a TCK put yourself, that's going to influence how you approach life and situations that you find yourself in and decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
Because we all have to make some serious decisions from time to time.
We do. And one of
So-
these things that's going to be interesting is, as we talk about this more, your kids, if you're a parent watching this, and if you're a kid, your parents may have a totally different cultural perspective than what you have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's totally true.
They might not feel like the United States is home,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or whatever country that is the passport culture.
Yeah.
And that's a common TCK challenge, is defining home. When people say welcome home,
Mm-hmm.
or when are you going home?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You might feel more at home in the country where you've lived growing up than where your parents are from or your aunts and uncles. Like, you're gonna definitely relate to the people there better, or you're going to have situations that you feel comfortable, like what's supposed to happen, but it's completely outside of the home where your grandparents live, or like I said, your aunts and uncles, cousins.
Let's go on to the next slide here. We're going to get into the what is a TCK? How do you define that? In this picture are some awesome TCKs from Argentina.
Woo!
And actually, a couple of them are related to you.
They are.
They're cousins.
Several of the gentlemen.
So this definition of a TCK, a lot of it comes from a book called Third Culture Kids. And the authors, there are two authors. Ruth Van Rieken is one of them, and David Pollock is the other. And we recommend those books all the time, Third Culture Kids. There's a new version out. I think we're on version 4 now of the TCK book. Yeah. So that's where this comes from. A lot of the research was done by David Pollock and Ruth Van Rieken. Ruth Van Rieken is still doing research and still adds to the knowledge database for what is a TCK. It's changing as the world continues to grow and change, and people are traveling more. It's really expanding. But for this purpose today, we're going to stick with TCK. The definition says this: a third culture kid, TCK, is a person who has spent a significant part of his or her developmental years outside of the parent's culture. The TCK frequently builds relationships to all the cultures while not having full ownership in any. So that's kind of the crux of what is TCK. And they're children who accompany their parents into another culture. Let's go on to the next slide. So here we are. This is a graphic of the third culture. We already explained the blue and the yellow, but this kind of gives you a picture of what is a TCK. So you've lived in one culture, you've lived in another. Now we could add that the home culture, it really doesn't matter, or even the yellow in terms of your TCK identity, because TCKs can be from any country to any country, but there's a common bond. Yeah.
Among those who have lived in other places and had to experience this. Yeah.
Because they understand that whole process. You can go on the next slide. It has a question mark in the middle. That's the TCK, right? It's a different culture. It's its own culture. It's not my home culture. It's not my foreign culture. It's the own culture. Yeah. So we'll move on here. What is a TCK? Although elements from each culture may be assimilated into the TCK's life experience, the sense of belonging is in relationship to others of similar background. That's David Pollock from the TCK book.
Mhm.
In other words, we can go back to that slide real quick. In other words, we have a relation. We have
The ability to form
connect
relation?
with different cultures,
Mhm.
and we take on each culture, but differently.
Mhm.
So we're not just saying we're from one principal culture,
Mhm.
but really we assimilate different things from different cultures.
Yeah. I have a short example, if
Yeah.
you mind me. When I grew up in Paraguay in South America, you being a woman, you don't tend to look people in the eye, men in the eye generally. But when I came to the US, I have to look at people in the eye, directly in the eye, because they take it as you're lying if you don't look at them in the eye.
Or awkward or not very
Awkward.
self-confident.
Correct. And so, and then when I lived in Africa, if you looked at gentlemen in the eyes, it was seen as flirting. So there are times that I've assimilated all those cultural norms, and I have to tell myself, okay, we're in this country and this context, so I know I can look at somebody in the eye or not. But that's just a tiny way that I've assimilated the different cultures into one, and now it's so subliminal that I do it without thinking.
Yeah.
So that's it.
You have to figure out what's culturally
acceptable
appropriate.
in that culture.
Where you are.
Yeah.
So here you see a picture of a group of TCKs gathering together, and part of the definition is you have a greater understanding, greater relationship with people of a similar background.
Mhm.
So all these people are from different countries, different places, but they end up getting to know each other better based on their background. So we can go on here. TCK profile. Okay, so
Yep.
who are TCKs?
Yep.
Who are TCKs? It's
They're-
a whole group of people.
Yeah. Huge groups of people. Basically, like you see, they're diplomats, foreign service employees, international businessmen and women, military personnel, missionaries, educators. They are, like we said, they've gone from their parents' host culture to a different culture, and they're growing up and developing. And yeah.
Interesting components today is many of the TCKs that actually transition, like I look at the military personnel.
Mhm.
It's possible to transition, say, to a foreign country, but not engage with the local culture,
Mhm.
but
Very
just
true.
stay engaged only with
On the base or whatever.
on
you're
the
at.
military base
Yeah.
or with diplomatic personnel. And that will influence
Your experience.
your experience, yeah, and your identity.
Yeah.
So TCKs, they're raised in a world that's genuinely cross-cultural, highly mobile, and they expect repatriation. So they expect someday I'm going to be moving back to my parents' host home culture.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
that's kind of the TCK profile. There are more components here to the TCK profile. Here we go.
These are good. They're broken down. Yeah.
Yeah, cross-cultural. They living in different cultures throughout their developmental stage. And I think that developmental stage is a key component for this as well, because kids are developing and they're living cross-culturally through their developmental stages. They're highly mobile. And I had to laugh when I saw this question. How many flights have you been on this year?
Well, because of COVID, I haven't been on any, but I wish I was on them all.
It's a bad year to be asking how many flights you've been on this year,
Yes.
but many TCKs fly regularly.
Before you walk. I mean, that's what I flew before I walked.
Yeah, my first flight, I think I was 2 months old.
Yeah, similar.
My first international flight, I was 2 months old. My son was the same way. So how many flights have you been on in your life? I actually had a friend years ago give me a flight log to start writing down every flight I've been on.
Really?
But it just got to be too much. It really did. It was
only a TCK would have a problem with that.
Yeah. And he was
That's
a TCK
funny.
that gave it to me. And he had books and books of them. He would send it up to the captain every flight he was on.
And have him sign it?
Yep. And have
That's
the captain
cool.
sign it.
Yeah.
So it was a really neat thing. And the captain's he was brought up to the cockpit a few times because a captain had signed it before for him.
And then they were like,
and then
hey,
I flew you before and signed it before.
Oh, cool.
And so the captain, the pilots, they see all the places that he's flown to. recently, and it's a great conversation starter.
Did you ever have a birthday on a plane? Because that
Oh,
has happened.
yeah, I have not. I have
Oh,
not.
yeah.
Have I? Actually, I landed. Yeah, I guess so. I landed in Brussels on my birthday one time.
Yeah.
So I got there to celebrate my birthday.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So, but you had
Sometimes-
yours in flight.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is like we were flying the day of birthday, and so it was like the stewardesses or the pilot would get on and say, "We just want to welcome, Rachel, and it's her 15th birthday, blah blah blah." So
Yeah.
it was kind of both.
And the third one here is they expect to move back to their parents' culture or
Yeah.
passport country. Notice that we don't say home country.
Yeah.
So a lot of people refer to it as the home country,
Yeah.
but it's not always that way. Okay, let's keep moving on here. For TCKs, moving frequently within cultures during a teen's developmental years interrupts the normal process of learning to function within social norms and establishing an identity. Every move brings a new culture, new social norms, and new rules for thriving within those norms. It's often unnoticed by the TCK. So let me just break this down for you here, that they learn different cultures. They learn how to respond socially, like the example you gave before. Oftentimes TCKs don't even know that what they're doing is unique.
Yeah, that's true.
People often ask me, what was it like growing up as a TCK? And I have no idea. It's just the norm. You go through it and you do it. But every time you move, you're learning new cultures, you're learning new social norms, you're learning new rules. How do I live in this culture? Which kind of gives TCKs a great perspective on the world.
It also gives you the flexibility to move in and out of cultures, I find, depending on how self-aware you are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was very interesting. I went to a church this past Sunday, and I noticed one of the ushers was leading someone to a seat, and he went like this to the lady, which come here. Well, there are cultures in the world that you would never do that. It's always underhanded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I just had to stop for a second, and be like, she's going to be offended, and she wasn't.
Yeah.
Because it was the
It's
social
just
setting.
normal.
It was normal.
Yeah.
So a lot of times TCKs, we move in and out of those different contexts, and we're learning how to thrive in it. Increased mobility exposes TCKs to a culturally rich and interesting life. It also fills their lives with constant goodbyes. Change becomes normal.
Yep. In fact, we kind of struggle when there isn't change, because we're constantly living for that. Well, what's new, and what am I going to do next? Or I'm going to that country, so I'm leaving this situation. I don't have to deal with this situation. I can just go there and be fine.
Yeah, I saw one of our TCKs post on Facebook this year that she had moved into a new house for the umpteenth time. She said, I can't remember ever living in a place for more than a couple of years. And someone was questioning her, like, really? Like, you've never lived in one house for more? And she's like, no, I never have. So saying goodbye, change it's normal. And it does affect it can affect relationships. It can affect your career path, your giftings, career path. If you never settle in a place, you don't want to settle down.
You do have a hard time committing sometimes to jobs, or you're looking for a job that provides travel and new experiences, and that's great when you're a certain age. But as you get older, then you start realizing, there's something about roots that I kind of want,
Yeah.
Or some of us do.
Yeah. So we have some tips for
Yep.
being a TCK. And, we've kind of gone through the whole TCK identity relatively quickly. Parents, just so you understand, as if there are parents that are watching this, understanding how your kids process the moves that you make will help you parent them.
Yeah.
It's okay for the kids not to feel the same way about your host country, your home country, as what you feel. They might not have an affinity towards fireworks on the 4th of July.
Yeah, they might be used to it in New Year.
Right. And New Year's Eve was always the big thing in the Netherlands.
Yeah, for
So-
sure. or even grandparents. Like they might not be close to your parents, but they are really close to an elderly couple where they live, because they've actually adopted them like grandparents. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that, if it's a healthy relationship, you want to cultivate probably, because that still gives them that sense of being somewhat invested in and loved and cherished, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So being a student of your kids, helping to see what they view, what they value. Also, it provides you opportunities to help prepare them for the next transition. If you're planning to move to a different country, you start planning ahead of time for some of the cultural, social norms. And it's always interesting to me. I love watching different people's habits that they do. There's some places in the world when you shake hands, you always put your left hand on, it's a sign of there's no weapon in this hand, respect, like historically. And so it's fun seeing how our kids do it without even thinking about it.
Or you bow and
it becomes it just becomes normal to the kids. But something to be aware of is when they move back to their home culture, how do you prepare to move back to a host culture? You can't expect them to have the same patriotic feelings, or even relationship with family is different.
Very true.
I told you all the places where I grew up. Well, my mom is from Muncie, Indiana. Muncie, Indiana, I've been there a few times in my life. There's a home church that she has there. Every time we go to that home church, I meet new people that are family to me.
Oh, really?
But I've never met them before. But like there are a ton of people
that are related
to me.
Yeah.
But because I spent my first 18 years overseas, I just didn't know them.
Yeah.
So one of the best tips for being a TCK is just developing a good self-awareness.
It's true. Yeah, definitely true.
And helping your kids develop that self-awareness too.
Yeah. I think, it lends itself to self-awareness, but I think as a parent helping your kid, the way you react to something is going to greatly influence the way they react to it. So being aware that if you're speaking negative about a new culture, your child is going to speak negative. They're going to see the negatives. But if you are open and you're willing to say, these are our core values that we believe, but we can accept some of the cultural stuff in the way we greet people, in the way we respect, in the foods that we try, that would help your child understand that it's okay. We have a core value, but we also can assimilate other things. And then as a TCK, being aware that, sometimes we're really awkward. We say some really dumb things that we're like, oh my gosh, because everybody just looks at you really funny, or they make fun of you. And then it's like, what did I do wrong? We'll learn from that experience.
As TCKs, we have to be willing to laugh at ourselves.
Exactly.
Because we will make mistakes.
Oh, totally. It will seem brilliant to us and to other TCKs if they're around, but generally that doesn't happen. And then we look like we got egg on our face. So it's okay.
Yeah. And it is the life, because you're always trying to figure out culturally, what am I supposed to be doing in this culture? Or you do things that you think is culturally correct and realize I'm in the wrong culture.
Yeah.
For me, I am forever spelling things the British way instead of the American way. I add extra U's, and OU. And it just, which I was in a British-based school, but only up until second grade. And then from then on, I was in an American-based school.
Wow.
For the most part.
Yeah. But your learning to read would have been influenced by the British system. So that's probably why you're a little confused there.
So developing good self-awareness, understanding you're going to make mistakes, understanding that there are people around you that are like you is key. And then we say recognizing their pros and cons, or positives, and I call them challenges to being a TCK. I don't like calling them negatives, because they're challenges.
Yeah, that's true.
You have a more culturally aware worldview.
You do.
You view things differently.
Yeah, you've probably brushed shoulders with different religions, different practices of different families that people who grow up in one country in one place, which I always think are really special because I'm like, wow, didn't have that experience. So I meet people that have lived in the same place for the last 25, 30 years, and I'm like,
What's
but
that like?
yeah, exactly. But you realize that as a TCK, you are more willing to talk to your Buddhist friend or your Muslim friend because you can relate on other things, but you're aware that they practice Ramadan or they do Eid or like all kinds of things, or your Christian friend goes to church, like, and you're accepting of that.
Mhm,
So,
mhm. Adaptability as part of that is a strength. Like it
yeah.
becomes a strength because you adapt to the situation. TCKs tend to be good students of what's happening around you. How am I supposed to react here? How am I supposed to fit in? How am I supposed to respond in situations?
Mhm.
TCKs become really good at adapting to whatever situation they're in. Of course, one of the best pros is you have friends in every part of the globe.
Very true. Very true.
I one time got a message from a TCK that was living in one of the Stan countries, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and they wrote me a message saying, "Hey, I ran into another TCK friend of ours in this country. Do you want me to reach out to them? Is there something I should know?" Because they're like, "Are they? Is there a reason why they're here?" And they just want to make sure that they could connect with them and help them.
Yeah.
So you could be literally in the middle of nowhere, and you can run into people that you know.
No, it's true. I remember living in Europe for a little while, and every weekend I was there for language school, and every weekend I would see who did I know in the surrounding countries, and then say, "Hey, can I come visit you like this
Mhm,
weekend? Can you show me around?"
mhm.
Um, yeah, and I think I mean, in a different situation, I was in an African country where we were having a coup attempt, and I was able to say, "Hey, who do you know in the embassy that could help me?" And we got out. So,
It is you build a unique set of
you
relationships.
do. You do.
So some of the difficulties or challenges with being a TCK,
Mhm.
you can get restless, and we talked about this.
It's really bad with COVID.
If you're used to moving every couple of years because of your parents'
Mhm.
jobs,
Yeah.
or parents, if you move every 3, 4, 5 years, that does build up a restlessness in your
Mhm.
kids, and it does work out later on in life. So,
Yeah.
it's not a negative trait, but it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. I think, and its key is being aware of it because it will be, as a TCK, something you face your whole life. But there will come a point where you do need to be rooted for your own mental health, for your emotional health. And so realizing that I'm always going to have a little bit of a hard time with commitment, but what are the steps I can take to combat? I see that as a weakness in me, but like, what can I do
Mhm,
so that it's not a weakness?
mhm,
So that, I'm embracing all those pros you're talking about, but at the same time, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to learn to commit. And maybe it's not committing to a place so much as a people. And
mhm.
I'm going to build a community around me of TCKs and non TCKs that I can invest in, and they're investing in me. And realizing that I struggle with that commitment. So let me find ways that commitment can be fluid,
Mhm.
as well as not so rigid structured one place.
Uh, More challenges, commit to things long term, which is a part of the whole being restless, staying in one place too long. A limited understanding of home.
True, true.
What is home? You hear of people having roots in,
Yeah,
one town generation after generation.
God bless them.
Yeah, God bless them. It's a limited understanding of home. I do, I want to challenge, if you're a youth worker, you work with teenagers, or there are other uh, people around you that are TCKs. This list might really be good for you to be able to invest in kids, to help this is how they're processing.
Mhm.
This is how they're thinking. They don't have a strong view of home. So how can I help them establish roots here?
Mhm.
How can we help them develop friendships? An interesting trait about TCKs
Mhm.
sometimes is TCK with TCK, they develop friendships really deep, really fast.
Mhm. Very true.
So
Very
they know that they're only there for a short time, and so they'll develop friendships really quick and go really deep.
Very
On
true.
the flip side, they can struggle building those relationships with non-TCKs,
Yes.
and they might feel like that non-TCKs
Don't get it.
that they don't get it.
Yeah.
And so it can take a lot longer to develop a relationship with non-TCKs.
Very true.
Tips for being a TCK. The next one, don't be narrow-minded with your friends.
Yeah. I think this goes to what you were saying, building those relationships. Realize that a TCK is going to understand a TCK the best, because even though we haven't experienced all of the same things in life, we have experienced similar things. So the biggest saying goodbye to every culture. And so we can relate on that fact, but keep in mind that you don't want to be so narrow-minded. I'm going to just find the expats in my community, those people that are like me. No, realize that you can learn a lot from the people there. Like learn from the people that in that country. There's your best friend could be the next person you meet on the bus, but you have to be willing to take that time to invest. And realize that.
And engage in local culture.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite tips.
Yes.
Get to know the culture.
Yeah.
Get to know the people.
Where do they all eat? Like, I mean, the best food is some of the hole in the walls where the locals are going.
Yeah.
So that person you just met, have them take you to the sushi bar, or, you know, best Indian food ever. That's one way to embrace it. You might get terribly sick, but that's part of the experience.
Which has happened,
yes. Yeah. You have a story out of it.
Yeah, so. Parents, I always challenge parents, get your kids out. Go visit the local culture. If you're a TCK and you're struggling to fit in where you are, find out what's great about the culture where you're living. What's great about the people? How can I find out more about this culture? What's the history here? What happened in this area? You know, I did middle school in a castle in the Netherlands with a moat around it. My brother got thrown in the moat regularly. He did. But it legit was a castle. Awesome. And so you can go online and you can learn about this castle and read the history of that castle. When they dug up the soccer fields to put in the soccer fields, they came across all these ancient artifacts from battles and wars that had taken place over there. So, I mean, it's just, there's cool history, but learn to engage in the local culture. Don't withdraw.
Very, very important.
Yeah, I visited families that they kind
of live in a bubble.
Yeah, now today with Netflix and all this stuff, you can stay inside a lot.
Yeah. And that's not why you're there. If you have been given the opportunity to live in a different country, realize as a parent, you're going to have to push your kids. Just as you're feeling pushed, you're going to have to push your kids to make friends, to go out, play sports, to see the sights, learn the history. And then as a TCK, realize that this is your opportunity. Like, basically, you're like a James Bond kind of figure at this point. I mean,
without killing people.
No, exactly. But we want to care and love and respect people. But this is a chance to learn study other people, learn to people watch. Like, read body language. Why do they do that? Why do they,
especially in your home culture?
Yeah.
Your home culture, people forget, like when you transition back to your home culture, it might be different than what you think it is.
You got to learn that too.
Yeah, don't assume that you know it.
Yeah.
One of the favorite things for me in engaging in local culture, as you mentioned this, is the food. Like I love learning about local foods.
Yes.
And everywhere I go around the world now, I know places where I want to eat.
Yeah.
And sometimes things sound horrible to people and they're like, I'm not going to try that,
but they're really delicious.
You've got to branch out.
Yeah,
you've got to try it.
I think even if you're like a nerd or something, like figure out the etymology of a word, or why do they use that phrasing. I have friends that live in the Horn of Africa, and they were telling me that like the ending of one word means like certain things, but the inflection is different. Like if you're interested in like words or language, learn that. Even programming, I've got family members that are in programming, and programming from one country is a little bit different from another. And you can learn to read like if you're a gamer, well, where's that person from? Like, there's something about them that gives that you a little hint that they're not quite like either from your host country or from, like, meet them, study them, learn, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking of my favorite foods around the world, and
it's not even lunchtime
I know
yet.
it's not even lunchtime here. But 10 years in the Netherlands, and there's Dutch food that I love. Your comfort food may be totally different than your parents' comfort food.
True. Anytime I go to a big city, I will look for Ethiopian or Middle
Okay.
Eastern food. Oh my
Now,
Lord,
Middle
I
Eastern,
love
I'm
it.
with you. Ethiopian,
It's amazing. But I didn't grow up in those.
Right.
I grew up in South America. We had rice and beans or steak.
Pinto gallo. Gallo pinto.
Kind of, like clay.
Whatever that is.
So.
But yeah, so my Dutch candy, my favorite is the honingrop, which is a honey licorice.
Okay, I hope you guys got that. You'll get big points if you send it to Chad.
Yes, honey licorice, honingrop.
Yuck.
There's a brand
really
called
like licorice.
Venco, I think is the name of it, that I love. And but it's got a strong smell. And someone in my office before used to hate the smell.
Oh, really?
And I remember taking a piece of it and hiding it in her purse.
That's so mean.
I know. Can you believe I did that? And it took her a couple hours, but a couple hours later, she was digging through her purse until she found it. But it didn't take long for her to realize that I had done that. But
to get rid of it.
I love my frites, my patates, French fries with mayonnaise. I also lived in Belgium for 10 years, and I love my samurai sauce.
Or your waffles.
My waffles,
Belgian
the real
waffles are amazing.
Wherever you go, this is the point. Wherever you go, engage in the local culture, engage in the local food, get to know local people. If you can, learn the language. Language is so important to getting to know people. I do speak Dutch. I speak French. I love the languages, love getting to know the people. Wherever I go, I try and learn those things. So pros and cons to being a TCK. One of the ways to help cope with being a TCK is to recognize that there are pros and cons.
Yeah. And realize you're a little different. That's okay. For some reason, God has allowed you to grow up in this country and will allow you to have other experiences. And there's a purpose for it. There's a reason for your life and that situation that you're going through, walking through. So
one of my favorite stories is we had a TCK that was raised in Japan, and she got a job at a bank in New York City after she graduated from university. And while she was working as a teller at the bank, she went down and had lunch in the basement with the other co-workers. Well, because she was a TCK, she spoke fluent Japanese. But she was a teller at the bank. When they were having lunch down there, she was speaking Japanese with some of the other co-workers. It was a Japanese-based bank. And as she's sitting there eating lunch, the president of the bank walked by and heard her speaking Japanese.
Yeah.
And called her up to her office the next day, and she became a manager overnight.
Wow.
Because he didn't know she spoke both English and Japanese fluently. So you never know where your experience is going to take you or what doors it's going to open. You see my final thought here on this PowerPoint. It says Sojo's Cafe in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
And what does it have to end with food?
It always does. There's a place in Chiang Mai that I've loved eating at. It's been a few years since I've been there. It's moved a few times. I think it's changed ownership. But I have a favorite meal when I go to Thailand. It's a pat krapao gai. It's like their basil chicken, and all you Thai TCKs are making fun of my accent. But at Sojo's, they had a T-shirt that said "Savor the Journey," and that is my last thought to each one of you guys. Enjoy the journey. You may be living in a totally different place. The culture might be unique. It might be different. Parents, you may be raising kids in a place that's totally different. Savor the journey.
Yeah.
Get out and enjoy and learn and see what you're doing, and realize that your identity might be different than what it would have been had you stayed in your host home culture. We'll talk about re-entry and transition back to the States or back to whatever your home culture is, because that's a whole nother process. We'll talk about that in another episode. But today we're just kind of talking about what is a TCK, what's a third culture kid. These are some basic thoughts of the TCK identity. Any last thoughts that you had?
No, like you said, enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
You may not be loving it right now. You might actually hate it. This might be new. Maybe you moved overseas when you were in your teens and you're really regretting the fact that you're not going to graduate with your high school friends, or you're not going to be part of that team. But you know what? Enjoy this. You can always change that perspective, because this is a whole new world that's opened up to you. So take advantage of that, enjoy that, thrive in that, find ways to thrive in it. So I would encourage you in that.
So that's it. We want to close in a word of prayer, and then we will let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today, and we look forward to being back with you in the future. Lord, thank you for each person that has tuned in. We just pray for families that are going through transition right now. Pray that you give them wisdom and insight into this transition and the new culture. I pray for teenagers that are just now learning about this TCK identity. I pray that it opens up insight as to who they are and why they feel certain ways, why they struggle with certain things and love other things. So just bless them, Lord, I pray, and we commit them to you right now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And we had muted all of our phones except for mine. It just rang if you didn't hear it. So bless you guys. We love you. Keep in touch. We pray you have a wonderful day, and we look forward to being online with you again here soon.
See you later.